Hi guys, and welcome to Charles Honnell, the Master Key System. This is our final lecture, our final chapter. This is chapter 24. And being our final lesson, we're going to do quite a bit of review. So I'm going to try and touch each point, of prior lectures and make sure we bring out the most value for you. So this is going to be sort of a summary and a conglomerate of the entire book. If you have practiced each of the exercises a few minutes every day, as suggested, you will have found that you can get out of life exactly what you wish by first putting into life which you wish. And you will probably agree with the student who said, the thought is almost overwhelming, so vast, so available, so definite, and so reasonable and so usable. Now, of course, guys, if this is your first time tuning in to True Higher Self and you just happen to have pulled up chapter 24 here, you would need to go back through the playlist and listen to, the lectures 1 through 23. Now, we're going to summarize for you today, but I think in order to get the most value, take your time. They're not very long lessons. I think we average about 25 minutes per discussion. And there's some really good exercises there to kind of bring you up to speed. So let's get into our final lecture here. Now, the fruit of this knowledge is, as it were, a gift of the gods. A gift of the gods, and it is the truth that makes men free. Not only free from every lack and limitation, but free from sorrow, from worry and care. Is it not wonderful to realize that this law is no respecter of person? That it makes no difference what your habit of thought may be, the way has been prepared. If you are inclined to be religious, the greatest religious teacher the world has ever known made the way so plain that all may follow. If your mental bias is toward physical science, the law will operate with mathematical certainty. If you are inclined to be philosophical, then Plato or Emerson may be your teacher, but in either case, you may reach degrees of power to which it is impossible to assign any limit. We speak and even think of the sun as giving light. Yet, we know it is simply giving forth energy which produces vibrations in the ether at the rate of 400 trillion a second, causing what are termed as light waves. So that we know that what we call light is simply a form of energy, and that the only light there is the sensation caused in the mind by the motion of the waves. When the number increases, the light changes in color. Each change in color being caused by shorter and more rapid vibrations. So that although we speak of the roads as being red, or the grass as being green, the sun as being blue, the sky as being blue, we know that the colors exist only in our mind, and their sensations experienced by us as a result of vibrations of light waves. When the vibrations are reduced below 400 trillion a second, they no longer affect us as light. We experience that as heat, a sensation of heat. It is evident, therefore, that we cannot depend upon the evidence of our senses for information concerning the realities of things. If we did, we should believe that the sun moved, that the world was flat instead of round, that the stars were bits of light instead of vast suns. The whole range, then, of the theory and practice of any system of metaphysics consists in knowing the truth concerning yourself and the world in which you live, in knowing that in order to express harmony, you must think harmony. In order to express health, you must think health. In order to express abundance, you must think also abundance. To do this, you must reverse the evidence of the senses. So, Honnell is saying here in summary that we have talked at length about establishing creative, positive, habitual thought patterns. If it is your desire to be abundant, financially abundant, then your thought must be around financial abundance and not disaster or lack or limitation. For what you think, you become. It is the core principle of the Master Key System that your habitual pattern of thought will establish itself in some sort of manifestation. And it is Honnell's job here in the book to alert you of that. If you're not aware of that, this is how creation happens. What are you thinking about? Is it wanted or unwanted? If it is unwanted, you simply have but to change the picture, change the film, change what you're thinking about. And so the question, of course, is how do I do that? How do I do that? When things seem to be so out of whack and I can't control my mind and these sorts of things, how do I just switch up? Well, I will tell you from personal experience, it is not an easy task, particularly if this is your first time. If you've never been a meditator, you've never meditated, you've never spent time with yourself, you've never tried to quiet your mind or simply observe your thoughts, then yes, it's like wrestling a bear. It's like trying to push back the ocean with your hands, capture smoke with your hands. But throughout the Master Key System, we talked about several different methods, all of them requiring us to go into the silence and really be able to control our bodies and then observe our thoughts. And in that quiet time, to be able to establish a thought pattern that is habitually positive. It's based on your definite chief aim, the things that you desire. When you come to know that every form of disease, sickness, lack, and limitation are simply the result of wrong thinking, you will have come to know the truth which shall make you free. And of course, Hanel here is referring to biblical scripture. You'll see how mountains may be removed. If these mountains consist only of doubt, fear, distrust, or other forms of discouragement, they are nonetheless real. And they need not only be removed, but to be cast into the sea. This is the great teacher's scripture, and quote, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, then you can say to a mountain, be thou removed, be thou cast into the sea, and the mountain must move. Hanel is showing you here from a metaphysical standpoint that it could be a mountain of doubt, a mountain of discouragement, of insecurity, of lack, of limitation. So many times in religious sectors, there's always a literal translation of these sorts of scriptures. And Jesus spoke in a way that was parables. And he was telling stories to make it reasonable for the people who were listening to him to understand, but also somewhat cryptic so that he could be protected and not be always accused of blasphemy and these sorts of things. So we've got to understand that. So Hanel does a good job throughout the Master Key System of combining the spiritual with the scientific and to help us to understand from a practical standpoint how to apply these methods within our lives. Your real work consists of convincing yourself of the truth of these statements. In other words, the hard part is taking what you think you know now and comparing it to what I'm telling you and what Hanel is telling you here in the Master Key System and convincing yourself that this is going to have value for you. And convincing yourself. That's the hard part. It's no different than going to therapy. Most adult people fail in therapy. Well, I shouldn't say most. There are a number of people who fail in therapy because they do not believe that therapy will help them. They are convinced that it will not be. And once you are convinced of any particular thing, that is your reality. Not that it has to be true, but it's simply because you convince yourself of that. Those who heal diseases by mental methods have come to know this truth. They demonstrate it in their lives and the lives of others daily. As all conditions are thought creations, and therefore entirely mental, disease and lack are simply mental conditions in which the person fails to perceive the truth. As soon as the error is removed, the condition is removed. The method of removing this error is to go into the silence and know the truth. As all mind is one mind, you can do this for yourself or anyone else if you have learned to form mental images of conditions desired. This will be the easiest and quickest way to secure results. If not, results can be accomplished by argument, by the process of convincing yourself absolutely of the truth of your statement. Remember that no matter what the difficulty is, no matter where it is, no matter who is affected, you have no patient but yourself. You have nothing to do but to convince yourself of the truth which you desire to see manifested. The problem a lot of times, guys, is that we don't really know what we want. We just want to feel good and we want to, to have things, but we don't really know what it is that we want. And because we don't really know, we launch out into areas where people are providing us with their advice, We're on social media, we're watching the news, and then all of a sudden we become more and more secure in terms of what it is that we want. Then our feelings start to change, our emotions start to be enhanced. We begin to develop fear or certain levels of insecurity based on what people are saying because we're not establishing our own thought. Hanel is saying here, the only patient you really have is you. Once you understand that you are a creator, once you understand that you are formed in the image of the likeness of the creator and you are creating your own external existence based on what you're thinking, once that solidifies within you, then you will seek people's counsel less and less. You'll go internal instead of external. Your answer is always internal. The quiet, the silence. Be still and know that I am God. So Hanel is saying when you are in disarray or in some sort of area where you find yourself that's not pleasant, that's not desirable, you have but to go inside and recreate within your mind, recreate within your imagination, within your visualization, begin to see the desired result and habitually think about that more and more, and it will manifest. This is an exact scientific statement in accordance with every system of metaphysics in existence, and no permanent results are ever secured in any other way. In other words, we're always thinking our creation. We're always thinking our creation into being. If you desire to help someone to destroy some form of lack, limitation, or error, the correct method is not to think of the person whom you wish to help. The intention to help them is entirely sufficient, as this puts you in a mental touch with the person. Then drive out your own mind any belief of lack, any belief of limitation, of disease, of danger, of difficulty, or whatever the trouble might be. As soon as you have succeeded in doing this, the result will have been accomplished, and the person will be free. All thought is a form of energy, a rate of vibration, but a thought of the truth is the highest rate of vibration known and consequently destroys every form of error in exactly the same way that light destroys darkness. No form of error can exist when the truth appears, so that your entire mental work consists in coming into an understanding of the truth. This will enable you to overcome every form of lack, limitation, or disease of any kind. So Hanel is saying here, as we begin, this journey of better understanding, the truth appears as we shed light in dark areas. And what that means is we've become conscious of our power. We've realized the source of creation, and we're part of that. We realize we're no longer the little me, the ego-based person, but the large I, the one that is connected to the omnipotent, the omnipresent, and the omniscient, the universal substance from which all things flow and are created. And when this light comes into the room, the darkness or the error or the lack or the limitation or the disease or whatever it is must disappear. It cannot stay. If you've ever gone into a dark room and you turn the light on, you don't have, a portion of darkness that hangs around in the room. It immediately flees. And we talked about before in earlier chapters that one of the reasons for that is, number one, there's no source of darkness. There's only the absence of light. There's a source of light, but there's no source of darkness. Think about that when it comes to your ability to discern the truth. And we talked about good and evil and these sorts of things. There's no source of evil. There is an absence of good. This is our paradigm now, and this is where your power exists. The universal mind is the totality of all mind, which is in existence. Spirit is mind because spirit is intelligent. The words are therefore synonymous. The difficulty with which you have to contend is to realize that mind is not individual. It is omnipresent. It exists everywhere. In other words, there's no place where it is not. It is therefore universal. Men have heretofore generally used the word God to indicate this universal creative principle, but the word God does not convey the right meaning. Most people understand this word to mean something outside of themselves, while exactly the contrary is the fact. Another core principle of the Master Key System is understanding that God is not outside of you. He is within you. He is you. While exactly the contrary is the fact. It is our very life. Without it, we would be dead. We would cease to exist. The minute the spirit leaves the body, we are nothing. Therefore, spirit is really all there is of us. It's all there is of us. It's what animates the body. We are not our body. We have a body. We're not our minds. We have a mind. We are the awareness behind the vessel, behind the thoughts. We are observing. As if it's a play or a movie, we are observing. Now, the only activity which the spirit possesses is the power to think. Therefore, thought must be creative because spirit is creative. This creative power is impersonal, and your ability to think is your ability to control it and make it useful for the benefit of yourself and others. When the spirit of this statement, the truth of this statement is realized, understood, and appreciated, you will have come into the possession of the Master Key, which is the whole reason we're reading this book. And remember that only those who are wise enough to understand, broad enough to weigh the evidence, firm enough to follow their own judgment, and strong enough to make the sacrifice exacted may enter and partake. And if knowledge does not apply itself, we talked about this in prior lectures. So when you come into the understanding of your ability, you come into the consciousness of your own power, you come into the understanding of how creation happens, you have to apply it in order to see the manifestations, that you desire. Now, here's the other side of that coin. Every day, there are unconscious people who live their lives, and creation is still happening the exact same way. So people who are living in fear, particularly now, people who are living in fear and who are fearful of every single thing, and they listen to news, listen to social media, conspiracies, whatever it is that gets them all up in an uproar. That habitual negative thought is going to manifest into more habitual negative thinking. And eventually you will have undesirable results. Why? Because you're only thinking about that. You're only thinking about that. And the whole essence of the Master Key System is to get you to understand that your thoughts matter. Your thoughts matter. Your thoughts are what create. It is the ultimate power to be able to think things into existence. That's how we have come to be. That's how we have come to be, through the universal substance, through the universal mind. Thought matters. Now, when the truth of this statement is realized, understood, and appreciated, you will have come into the possession of the Master Key. You're now in the possession of the Master Key. So you can't move forward now after listening to this particular lecture, this discussion, as if you don't know, because you do. Now, whether you apply is up to you, but you do know. You do realize that if you are in an undesirable position, you have but to go inward to change the inward picture, which will eventually result in a change word on the outside. Convince yourself of that. Prove that to you. Take a week or two, do the exercise that we talked about, chapters 1 through 23, and convince yourself of that. Convince yourself of that so it becomes true for you. This week, try to realize that this is truly a wonderful world in which we live, that you are a wonderful being, that many are awakening to the knowledge of the truth, and as fast as they can awake and come into knowledge of things which have been prepared for them, quote, they too realize that I have not seen nor ear heard, neither have it been entered into the heart of man, the splendors which exist for those who find themselves in the promised land. And of course, Hanel is equating the promised land to the ideology of knowledge and understanding the truth of who you are, the consciousness of your own power, the usability of this knowledge now, the ability to, as Abraham says, consciously create, become a conscious creator. Use your thoughts for good for the positive. And I get it. There's a lot of negativity in the world, but there's also a lot of beauty. Yes, there's a pandemic, but the world is still a beautiful, beautiful place. And there's a lot of good going on, even in times that you would consider a pandemic. You do not have anything to fear. Create the best picture in your mind. Create the best habitual thought pattern you can, and prove it to yourself. This works. They've crossed the river of judgment and have arrived at the point of discrimination between the true and the false, and have found that all they ever willed or dreamed was a faint concept of the dazzling reality. Let's look at some areas that are going to hold a lot of value for us moving forward. And what I would do if I was you, I would obviously subscribe to the channel, True Higher Selves, but also make sure that you save this particular playlist. I will be very honest with you. This is probably the 10th time I've gone through and read this book. Well, obviously not on the channel, but personally, I revisit this book because of the core concepts that it is such a foundational work. It is such a valuable work to, not just to me, but I can only speak from my vantage, but to me because it reestablishes, let's say I get off course and I find myself in some areas where I don't want to be, negative thought patterns, etc. I go back and say, okay, where did I veer off here? Where did I veer off? And I reestablish myself with some of these core principles to get back on track. So I'm suggesting to you to do the same thing. Hold on to this playlist and just visit it from time to time. The way we've broken it out here is by chapter, and each chapter heading should tell you, the area of concentration that we're going to be talking about. And so if you find yourself in need of some support in that particular area, just pull up that particular lecture or discussion and listen through it and reestablish yourself and get back where you need to be. So here I'm just going to hit some high-level summary questions, just kind of reestablish where we are, and then we're going to close it out for today. Now, number one, upon what principle does the theory and the practice of every system of metaphysics in existence depend? What principle does the theory, metaphysics exist and depend? Upon a knowledge of the truth concerning yourself and the world in which you live. And listen, one of the things, obviously, Hanel is not with us anymore. But for me, by reading his works, I get a sense that he was somewhat of a scientist, somewhat of a mathematician, somewhat of an A type. In other words, he wanted to make sure that we understood that this is not religion. What I'm explaining to you is not religion. And I say that because a lot of times in a lot of religions, people have, number one, they've owned God. How? Because they can tell you, because they're a pastor or bishop, they can tell you what God said. Well, quite honestly, anyone could do that. And the unfortunate part is you've got hundreds of thousands of people who will listen to them because of the position that they hold. Now, not to bash anyone's religion, but the truth of the matter is no one can own God. But conceptually, we must understand that God is in and among all of us. And that is not a permeating thought within religion. Hanel wanted to ensure that we understood that this is a scientific method. Now, they have religious correlation and affectability, but it is scientific. It is proven. This works. You can try it and get the results, test it and see these sorts of things. You can create a method, a ideology. You can create a process for your life, establish yourself in these sorts of practices and see the types of results. This is not a situation if you go to church and someone says, hey, you just need to pray more, or why does this happen to me? I'm tithing, I'm doing all these things you say do, but yet I'm not getting results. I've been there, done that. People don't tend to have an answer because you're looking for it in the wrong places. They're not going to have an answer. So this is time to go inward. Now, what is the truth concerning yourself? The real I or ego is spiritual and can therefore never be less than perfect. So the terms have sort of changed a little bit as we progress, but ego I've always referred to as the small self. That's who you think you are, your name, your ethnicity, the fact that, you're a certain sexual orientation, or you're a woman or a man. It doesn't really matter. That's who you identify with in the society. That's the small person. But the large I is the understanding of your connectivity to the universal. It's the power I. It is not the body. It is not the mind. It is the voice behind those things. The one that is witnessing the stage play. That's the I. That's the truth. What is the method of destroying any form of error? Well, to absolutely convince yourself of the truth concerning the condition which you wish to see manifested. And we talked about that a little bit here in chapter 24. If you do come into the understanding of the truth, being you're part of this omnipresence, omnipotent, and omniscient one, and you live and move and have your being in Him, then you're part of all that. The reason why the elements of your body are also found in the stars and the universe is because you are the universe. The universe is expressing itself through us. We're individual and unique expressions of the universe. So we have but to use these principles in order to engage in that type of power to get the types of results that we need. Now, what is meant by thinking? Clear, decisive, calm, deliberate, sustained thought with a definite end in view. That is thinking. That's important. We're not talking about daydreaming. We're not talking about, negative thought patterns. We're talking about what Hanel says is constructive thought pattern. Constructive thought patterns. Number one, we start off with what Napoleon Hill established as a definite chief aim. Where am I going? Why do I want to establish this? For what purpose? We're going to write that thing down because this is what we are shooting for. Now, what will be the result? What will be the result of establishing a positive, constructive, and habitual thought pattern? You'll also be able to say, it is not I that doeth the works, but the Father that dwelleth in me. He does the work. You will come to know that the Father is the universal mind and that He does really and truly dwell within you. In other words, you will come to know that the wonderful promises made in the Bible are fact, not fiction, and can be demonstrated by anyone having sufficient understanding. So here's the deal. Sufficient understanding. So much of what we do in life, I would say almost 100% of it, has to do with having sufficient understanding. I don't care if you are taking care of a plant, or if you are taking care of a child, or if you are establishing a business, or if you are establishing the type of lifestyle and the life that you want to have. It will come from having sufficient understanding. You've probably listened to this entire series, and thank you for doing that, because you're trying to better your understanding. Why? You want to create something, more than likely a more productive life system. Okay? So, in order to do that, you must have sufficient understanding of how to do that. Establish a particular practice. Well, how do you get sufficient understanding? Well, you seek it. You seek the knowledge. You knock and the door shall be open. We know that knowledge does not apply itself and that faith without works is dead. So me giving you a method by which to improve your life, that's great, but unless you apply it, you're not going to get the end result, the manifestation that you would like. And I say all that to say this. You've listened to all this. Please apply it. And my hope is that by giving of myself to you through these lectures, that you're able to see some constructive and positive changes in your life in the areas that most concern you and that most benefit you. And then by doing that, to share the information with others, because that really is the contagion that we want to develop. We want that to be contagious. We want the light to travel from us to others. No different than what we're dealing with this pandemic. We want the light to travel. We want people to awaken. We want people to live in their power and not to be fearful and not to be afraid. Okay? So guys, thanks so much for joining us. This is our last chapter of Charles Hanel and the Master Key System. We're going to move on to another series and to another author. Please subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. Take a look in the descriptions below. We do have a free yoga and meditational download for you that will help benefit you in your day-to-day practices. And listen, have a great day, and continue to check back to the channel for more empowering information. Thank you.